In this video, we're going to be looking at the financials of Liquide, which is a recommendation by one of you guys. Now, if you do have some additional recommendations, don't hesitate to put them in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to look at it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Liquide is a massive multinational company located in France. They supply gases and high quality services to industrial customers, patients and hospitals, and they also have invested in multiple other sectors such as oil and gas, tech, pulmonology, smart cities, and a lot more. Basically, they provide a lot of building blocks to keep on running our everyday life. So let's have a quick run through their financials here, shall we? So their revenue has been steadily growing by 7% here for the past 10 years, 15 billion in 2013, just shy of 30 billion euros in 2022. Once again, all these numbers are euros because of course I'm talking about a French company. Their EBITDA has also grown by about 7%, which is about in line with their revenue numbers, which means their margins are remaining relatively the same, which is not necessarily what I like to see. I always like to see some increasing margins because a company is more efficient in operating their businesses, but this does not seem to be the case for Liquide. They mostly grow their EBITDA by some expansions and by some acquisitions. 3.8 billion in 2013, 7.3 billion here in 2022, where we definitely saw that 2022 was a pretty good year for them. Their debt level is very low, all things considered. 6 billion in 2013, 8.8 billion in 2022, not much of an increase there. In fact, that debt is growing less fast than their EBITDA is, which is definitely giving them a lot of room for errors and a lot of room to leverage up in the future if they wish to do so for maybe a big acquisition. They also have a lot of excess cash on hand at all times. 1 billion in 2013, 2 billion in 2022. The market cap has been steadily increasing by 8% annually, and this of course once again does not include dividends. Dividends are on top of the market cap, and currently that dividend yield is about 1.8%. So I think overall for the past 10 years they've created an IRR of around 10%, simply looking at these numbers right now, my quick and dirty estimate. Enterprise value is what you get when you take the market cap to which you then add the debt and you subtract the cash. Is the entire value of the business in the way that a competitor might see it, for example an acquisition. As you may have noticed here, their market cap is around 70 billion already in 2022, which is quite vast. They are a pretty big company. EV/EBITDA tells us about the multiple that Liquide has been trading for the past 10 years. How many years of EBITDA does it take for Liquide to pay back the entirety of their enterprise value? Overall, the trend for the past 10 years has been around the 10 times EV/EBITDA ratio, which is something that we see quite often in European companies. Their multiples is just way lower than their American counterpart, which is also why you quite often see a higher dividend yield here. Net debt to EBITDA is always around the 1 times range. Now I always say that net debt to EBITDA, I'd like it below the 3 times ratio. Liquide is well below that number. If they want to, they can easily leverage up 2 times their EBITDA numbers. That is 2 times 7 billion euros, about 14 billion. If they want it really bad, they can probably get the loan for it, although in the current high interest rate environment it may not be a good idea. But if they do have a very big acquisition that they do want to make, I think they won't have too much problems to actually get that money. So I think that's definitely a possibility for Liquide here in the future to really increase their revenue and EBITDA numbers by doing a big acquisition. Of course, it's also nice just to know that the company that you're holding has a very low debt level, which is definitely true for Liquide. So this then brings me to their cash flow statement. Their cash flow has been growing in line with EBITDA at about 8% annually. 2.8 in 2013, 5.8 in 2022. But Liquide is a quite capital heavy company. They have a lot of infrastructure to maintain, which is what we see in the capital expenditure column here. They had to put back 2.1 billion in capital expenditures in 2013 and already 3.3 billion in 2022. Their capex is growing less fast than their cash flow from operations, which does mean that they are increasing the margins for their cash flow, which is in fact very nice to see. But you also see that Liquide requires a lot of money every single year to keep on running their operations here. The moment that we take the cash flow from operations and we subtract the capital expenditure from that, we get the free cash flow, which is basically all the money that's available to you at the end of the year. This is your pro rata ownership of the company. This money can be used to either pay a dividend, buy back stocks, buy back some debt or do some acquisitions. Now, Air Liquide has been doing a lot of acquisitions historically. They've also been paying a steady dividend of about 2%, but we also see that for the past 10 years, they have not been buying back shares. In fact, they are slowly but surely diluting it with some stock-based benefits, as well as some acquisitions that they had to make in 2015, which also costed them quite a bit of shares. Now, this is not too uncommon, I think, for most European companies, especially companies listed on the Euronext of Paris. They do quite often dilute their share count to raise some additional capital, which is not as rewarding to shareholders as maybe the American way of doing things, where buying back stock is a big thing to reward shareholders in America. I think on the other side of the pond in Europe, it's not quite as popular as it is in America, although we did see a lot of companies start to buy back shares last year during the Corona crisis, when most share prices were quite low, and it was a very good return for investors to buy back some shares. Maybe that's a trend that will continue here in the future for European stocks, but as of right now, at least for Air Liquide, I do expect them to keep on diluting their share count. Free cash flow per share is what you get when you take the free cash flow and you divide it by the amount of shares outstanding, and we see a lovely 13% increase annually for Air Liquide's free cash flow per share, which is very, very attractive to be sure. The price per share as seen on the open market started with around 70 euros in 2013 and ended up at 133 euros in 2022, a compounding annual growth rate of 7%, simply looking at the price on the open market itself, once again not including dividends. The free cash flow yield here for the past 10 years is circling around the 3.5% range, not too high, not too low, I don't think. So let's try to forecast Air Liquide into the future. So if I take a look at their historic numbers, I can see an overall EBITDA growth of around 7% annually. I'm going to slightly reduce that to 6% for the first 5 years and then 5% for the last 5 years to be a bit more conservative with my estimate. And if my conservative estimate beats the stock market, that's when I'm going to be interested in buying the stock. They have an average multiple for the past 10 years of around 10 times. So I'm also going to give them that multiple 10 years from now. This gives me an enterprise value 10 years from now of 125 billion euros, from which we then subtract the debt, we add the cash, gives us a market cap of 118 billion euros, divided by the amount of shares outstanding. I'm assuming here that the amount of shares outstanding remain the same. This gives me a stock price 10 years from now of 226 euros and 62 cents. And for the free cash flow model, I'm going to do a very similar thing. I'm going to grow it by 10%, even though historically they've been growing it by 13%, and I'm going to grow it by 8% here for the last 5 years. I'm also going to attach that average yield of 3.5%, giving me a stock price 10 years from now of 328 euros and 60 cents. Right now on the open market itself, I can buy as many shares as I want of Air Liquide for 160 euros and 64 cents. If I take a look at both of my projections, so the enterprise value as well as the free cash flow model, I expect an average share price 10 years from now of 277 euros and 61 cents. Simply looking at the price on the stock market alone, on the open market itself, I expect a compounding annual growth rate of 5.6% annually. But the moment that we include all the free cash flow that we have projected in our free cash flow model, I expect an IRR of 10.8%. Do of course keep in mind that part of the free cash flow is actually used to fund their acquisitions already, so it's already included into the models here. So I think the actual true number of return that you can expect for Air Liquide is somewhere between 5.6 and 10.8%. A big shout out to Jelle, who brought this point up in a previous video where we had a lovely discussion on exactly what it means to use the CAGR or use the IRR. Sometimes the real truth lies somewhere in the middle, because you don't always receive all of the free cash flow that we have projected here, because part of it is already included into the enterprise value and free cash flow model. And this is why it's always important to do your own due diligence, to have a look exactly where the free cash flow is going, how much they are investing in acquisitions and expansions, to see exactly how much money is available at the end of the road. Any analysis I do here gives you a broad market perspective, but I'm not going that in depth into actually where most of that money is going. I very much recommend, if you do want to buy a company, you have a look at their 10K to see exactly what's been going on there. On average, the market returns about a 10% IRR, so I think Air Liquide is somewhat performing in line with the overall market expectations. We definitely saw a big run up recently for their share price. Right now, the share price is 160 euros and 64 cents, whereas in 2022, not too long ago, they had a share price of 133 euros, so they already gained about 20% here. Let's see what happens if the price goes up or comes down a little bit. So the moment that the price reduces to 115 euros, I expect an IRR of 15.9%, or even when it gets close again to the 133 that we saw in 2022, I expect an IRR of around 14%, which is definitely outperforming the market, although not by a very large margin. The moment that the price moves up again to, let's say, 180, 192, I actually expect a underperforming result here for Air Liquide. I think right now with the current share price, Air Liquide, I expect them to perform in line with the overall market. It's a very steady player, it's a very big player, and they are very much needed in the overall economy for Western Europe, so I definitely don't see them going anywhere in the future. They are basically unleveraged, which means they are a very risk-free investment right now, and maybe definitely attractive for a diversified portfolio. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio!